This episode is brought to you by NordVPN. You can go to nordvpn.com/RoyalOceanFilm for 70% off of a 3-year plan. And if you use the code RoyalOceanFilm, you can get 4 extra months for free. I think you could make the argument that Fantastic Mr. Fox was something of a major turning point in director Wes Anderson's career. After the critical drubbing of Life Aquatic and the lukewarm performance of The Darjeeling Limited, 2 films that have since been positively and rightfully reassessed, it was the start of an upward curve, setting the stage for his most recent features, all of which have been among his most well-received and financially successful films.
Are you cussing with me?
No, you cussing with me?
Don't cuss and point at me.
You're gonna cuss with somebody, you're not gonna cuss with me, you little cuss.
Me.
Fantastic Mr. Fox itself wasn't a financial success, but it was perhaps Anderson's most warmly received film to date when it was released 10 years ago. And it was one that I think a lot of people, myself included, really latched onto.
Crisp up those ducks. Drag those chickens. Slow them down just a little bit. We're a little ahead. Where are the apples? Still now? Do you still have them raw? Well, slice them up. Let's get them in the pan.
The micro-intensive, handmade quality of stop motion fits the abundantly detailed doll's house vibe of Anderson's films like the most well-manicured glove ever imagined. The worlds inside his films feel almost miniaturized. You could almost look at his live-action features as blueprints for future stop-motion animations. He briefly experimented with the medium in small doses for the marine life scene in Life Aquatic, but post-Fantastic Mr. Fox, it's become something we've seen him develop even further, employing models and miniatures in Moonrise Kingdom and the Grand Budapest Hotel, integrating live action and animation together in a seamless and wholly Anderson-esque way. But unlike the stereotype of the director who loses sight of soul in the face of spectacle, the warm, beating heart at the center of Anderson's films hasn't at all been lost as he's displayed more of a confidence with visual effects.
Don't let go.
In fact, for me, Fantastic Mr. Fox is the most emotionally resonant of all of his films.
Oh, you gonna pout about it? Because I've had it up to here with the sad house guest routine.
I've always loved this quiet, tender little moment right here between Ash and his new and not at all welcome bunkmate Christopherson. It's a gentle moment of quiet connection, interrupting a story of adolescent rivalry.
He really is your father's nephew, isn't he?
Not by blood.
No?
He's from my mother's side.
Oh, yeah.
It's a pitch-perfect illustration of what I think is a real emotional maturity found all throughout Anderson and co-writer Noah Baumbach's script.
Who am I, Kylie?
Who, how? What now?
Why a fox? Why not a horse or a beetle or a bald eagle? I'm saying this more as, like, existentialism, you know?
The Beach Boys may sing about a town full of heroes and villains, but the core of Fantastic Mr. Fox isn't quite so black and white, because in a way, Mr. Fox is the villain of his own story.
Kill him!
The entire conflict of the film, the 3 grotesque farmers going on a rampage, destroying everything that gets in their way, is, of course, a conflict that can be directly traced back to Mr. Fox's own actions.
And so it begins.
A lot of good animals are probably gonna die because of you!
Bogus, Bunce, and Bean would likely have no quarrel with Mr. Fox had he not first stolen from them, his thievery being a product of his personality, one that, although charming and likable, is entirely narcissistic and ultimately antagonistic.
I think I have this thing where I need everybody to think I'm the greatest, the quote-unquote fantastic Mr. Fox. And if they aren't completely knocked out and dazzled and kind of intimidated by me, then I don't feel good about myself.
He's fighting to reclaim what he thinks is his rightful personality, whereas his son Ash, in whom this storyline of reconciling one's own personality is reflected in, is fighting to just simply find his personality.
What's that?
What, this? Oh, that's nothing. That's just some old trophy I won for being an athlete.
Ash, a son perpetually in the shadow of his quote-unquote fantastic father, is the seemingly untalented black sheep of the family.
Look at that. This kid's a natural. I'm speechless, Christopherson.
Constantly looking for approval and praise, but looking for it in all the wrong places.
I can fight my own fights.
No, you can't.
It's their actions, born from a crisis of personality, that results in conflict and that drives the story into its second and third acts. Mr. Fox's thievery triggers the farmer's retaliation that sends the animals underground, and Ash's mission to retrieve his father's tail results in Christopherson's kidnapping, or foxnapping.
Excuse me. Excuse me.
In the end, it's the moment of humility in which Mr. Fox recognizes his own narcissistic need for everyone else's approval that begins reconciliation, and the selfless moment between father and son that follows that completes it.
And the whole time I put paw over paw, scooping dirt and pebbles with your mother digging like crazy beside me, I kept wondering, who is this little boy gonna be?
Or girl.
Or girl, right, because at that point we didn't know. Ash, I'm so glad he was you.
It's a real kind of emotional maturity and complexity that you don't always see in children's entertainment, or for that matter, even quote-unquote grown-up films. Actually, wait. Is this a children's film? How would you classify this? It may seem like a strange question to ask, but believe it or not, 10 years ago, this was a prominent question floating around. A handful of weeks before Fantastic Mr. Fox's November 2009 release, Spike Jonze's adaptation of Where the Wild Things Are opened to not only that same question, but to something of a minor controversy, as there were legitimate concerns that the movie was too much for younger audiences. Too scary, too sad, too confusing, too dark. They're almost sibling films, prime examples of the kind of movie that exists in that awkward middle ground of films that aren't necessarily geared towards children, but aren't exactly geared towards adults. A.O. Scott described them as movies that play a kind of reverse dress-up, disguising adult anxieties in the costumes of make-believe and fanciful spectacle. They're an interesting case study. One was very clearly marketed towards children and families, and the other towards adults. Or at least smarmy pseudo-intellectual grad students, of which I'm proudly one of. Both drastically underperformed. Whether they were too adult for families, too juvenile for adults, or some combination of the two is likely unanswerable. But here we are 10 years later still talking about them, and that's perhaps what matters more than anything else. The conversation about appropriate children's literature is a rabbit hole for another time, but on the question of Fantastic Mr. Fox and its relation to children and family films, here's A.O. Scott again for a final thought. Sometimes we make too much of the division between generations, which is, after all, not a gap, but a continuum. Every adult is a former child, just as every child is an incipient adult. And at their best, children's film and entertainment is an attempt to communicate across the distance. 10 years later, I think Anderson's marvelous little gem continues to fulfill that charge.
Thank you for listening. Cheers, everyone.
Let's eat!
Thanks so much for watching, guys. This episode is brought to you by NordVPN. So my process for making these film essays usually lasts for about 2 or 3 weeks, and the first half of that time is entirely spent in research and writing and rewriting, and I do almost all of that in a few local coffee shops. And having the VPN with me as I work has really erased any potential concerns I've had about online security. And in light of recent events, Nord is taking steps to become more powerful and safer than ever before. Whereas most VPN servers are third-party, Nord is moving to 100% owned servers. But more than that, they're building a committee of cybersecurity leaders and experts from around the globe to bring up industry standards across the board. I've used NordVPN for years. I've never had any concerns. If you're like me and you do a lot of work in coffee shops or libraries, you should absolutely consider signing up. It's an invaluable extra layer of protection. If you're interested in signing up and getting a sense of ease while you're on the internet, they're offering an incredible deal. You can go to nordvpn.com/RoyalOceanFilm for 70% off of a 3-year plan. And if you use the code RoyalOceanFilm, you can get 4 extra months for free. Thanks again for watching, everybody. I'll see you next time.